A homeless black teenager faces cruel mockery on the streets as a rowdy biker insults him. The boy chooses kindness over pride, fixing the biker's stalled motorcycle. One arrogant insult flips into silent tension as the boy delivers a powerful line that shifts the energy. The chapter ends with a mysterious cliffhanger, hinting that this small act of help will echo far beyond the night. "We don't take handouts from rats like you." The words cut across the cold night air like glass shattering in silence. A group of bikers had stopped near a flickering neon diner, their motorcycles lined like steel beasts along the curb. One of the bikes sat dead, its engine sputtering with a hopeless cough. The man speaking was tall, wearing a leather vest patched with the notorious insignia of the Hells Angels. His laughter was sharp, loud enough to make the late-night stragglers in the diner window look away. On the sidewalk, a 17-year-old black boy crouched near a trash bin. His clothes were worn, his sneakers torn, but his eyes calm, steady, and far older than his years met the biker's arrogance with quiet defiance. "Move along, kid," another biker barked, kicking the dirt near him. "This ain't your world." The boy rose slowly. His name was Malik, a teenager without a bed, without a roof, carrying his whole life in a torn backpack. Hunger gnawed at him, but hunger wasn't new, it was the humiliation that stung. Everyone was watching now, a waitress pausing with coffee. In her hand, a trucker smoking by the pump, a couple frozen by the door. Malik didn't flinch. He looked at the stalled motorcycle, smoke curling weakly from its pipes. With a voice steady but quiet, he asked, "Your bike won't start, will it?" The biker leader sneered. "What's it to you, street rat?" Instead of answering, Malik knelt beside the machine. His fingers, though calloused and cracked from surviving alleys and shelters, moved with precision. He tapped the choke, adjusted the fuel line, and pressed his ear close to the engine. He had fixed scrap bikes before, salvaged from junkyards. To escape the silence of nights, the leader laughed louder. "Look at this. A homeless mechanic thinks he's saving us." A few bikers joined the laughter, but Malik's focus never broke. In the silence between jeers, the boy's hands twisted the throttle just once. The engine coughed, then roared to life, filling the street with thunder. The laughter died instantly. For a moment, all eyes hung on the boy, standing calmly beside the vibrating steel monster he had just awakened. The waitress's hand trembled against the glass. The couple by the door whispered, and even the trucker's cigarette burned forgotten between his fingers. The biker leader's smile faded into something darker, uneasy, suspicious. He had meant to mock, to crush. Instead, he had been exposed. Malik looked him in the eye, his voice low but unshaken. "You don't have to respect me, but your bike does." The words dropped like iron. No one moved. The rumble of the motorcycle filled the night, drowning every insult left unspoken. For the first time, the arrogant leader had no reply. Malik slung his backpack onto one shoulder, turned his back to the crowd, and walked into the shadowed alley beyond the diner. The last thing he heard before disappearing into darkness wasn't laughter. It was silence, heavy, loaded, unsettled. Behind him, one biker muttered nervously, "Boss, did you see how he—" "Shut up," the leader snapped, but his voice trembled ever so slightly. His eyes followed the boy until the night swallowed him whole. What Malik didn't see, what no one there could have guessed, was that this simple act of help had already set something unstoppable in motion. By tomorrow, the world around him would never look the same. The city never truly slept. Neon signs hummed, alleys stank of oil and urine, and the occasional siren cut through the night like a warning bell. Malik curled against the back wall of an abandoned laundromat, his backpack tucked beneath his head. The cardboard beneath him barely softened the concrete's bite. He closed his eyes, but the sound of the motorcycle's roar replayed in his mind. Not the laughter, not the insults, just that roar. The bike had listened to him. Machines, unlike people, didn't judge skin or clothes. They responded to touch, to knowledge, to respect. Malik whispered to himself, "One day, I'll build one of my own." Across town, however, the story of that night was mutating. Inside a smoke-filled bar where leather vests lined the walls like flags, the Hells Angels leader, Cutter, slammed his fist against a wooden table. Beer spilled over, but no one dared clean it. "That kid made me look weak," Cutter growled, his voice like gravel dragged across steel. His crewmen with tattoos that told stories of prison and battle shifted uneasily. "It was just a kid," one muttered. Cutter's glare silenced him instantly. "It wasn't just a kid. He made fools of us in front of strangers. Our name means fear, respect. And tonight, they saw us needing help from trash." He leaned forward, his eyes sharp and wild. "No one disrespects me and walks away. But—" Another biker, older, with silver threaded in his beard, spoke slowly. "Boss, it wasn't disrespect. That boy, he fixed the machine like he was born for it. Maybe it meant something." Cutter's jaw tightened. "Meant something?" "He's nothing. A homeless stray. Don't ever forget what we are. We don't bow to rats." Yet even as he spat the words, a part of him couldn't forget the look in Malik's eyes. Calm. Untouchable. Cutter had power, numbers, fists, and reputation, yet for the first time in years he had felt small. Meanwhile, Malik stirred in his. Restless sleep, the hunger in his stomach gnawing louder than the city's noise. He dreamed of his mother's voice, though her face had grown blurred with time. He dreamed of a home, of warmth, of food that wasn't stolen or begged. Morning light spilled over broken glass and graffiti walls. Malik woke shivering, his breath misting in the cold dawn air. He pushed himself up, gusted off his jacket, and walked toward the shelter's soup line. He thought nothing of the night before, except that maybe, just maybe, he still had some worth left in his hands. But worth was exactly what others had begun to see. At the bar, Cutter's younger lieutenant leaned in close. "Boss, the other chapter's already heard. Word spreads fast. They're asking who the kid was. Some think it's a sign. A stray fixing a beast none of us could tame. It's the kind of story brothers repeat." Cutter slammed his glass down hard. "Enough. I don't want his name spoken." Again, but it was too late. The story had already slipped out of his control. By nightfall, whispers traveled beyond the city limits. Biker after biker repeated the tale, some mocking, some curious, some strangely reverent. Who was this homeless boy who fixed what the angels could not? Malik had no idea. As he sat outside the shelter chewing a piece of stale bread, he didn't notice the black van parked across the street, its tinted windows hiding a pair of watching eyes. The van's engine purred softly before it rolled away. Its driver lifted a phone, his voice low. "Yeah, we found him. Just a kid. But tomorrow he won't be alone." The voice on the other end gave a quiet laugh. "Good. Let's see how Cutter reacts when the whole brotherhood stands for the boy he tried to humiliate." Malik looked up at the fading sky, unaware of the storm that was already gathering. The city morning was cruel. Car horns screeched. Bus brakes hissed, and the streets buzzed with impatience. Malik shuffled along the sidewalk with his backpack dragging one strap off his shoulder. The little he had, half a loaf of bread, a torn blanket, a notebook filled with sketches of bikes clattered. Inside. At a street corner, a man in a pressed suit brushed past him, muttering, "Watch it, kid?" Malik swallowed his reply. He had learned long ago that biting back only brought fists or cops. He kept walking, but something gnawed at him. His instincts, sharpened by years of sleeping with one eye open, whispered a warning. Someone was watching. Behind him, parked across the street, a motorcycle idled. A lone rider leaned against it, helmet on, arms folded. When Malik turned, the rider didn't move, just stared. The boy's chest tightened, but he forced himself to look away. He had no enemies. He had nothing worth taking. Yet the gaze followed him. At the same time, across the city, Cutter sat hunched over a table inside the Angels clubhouse. His cigarette burned low, the ash trembling as his hand shook. "They're laughing at me," he muttered. His crew shifted uncomfortably. None of them had seen Cutter like this, haunted, restless. "Boss, nobody's laughing." One tried. Cutter's head snapped up, his eyes bloodshot. "Don't lie to me. They're whispering about the boy. The stray who made me look weak. You think I don't hear it? They're saying he's chosen." The older biker with silver in his beard spoke again, quietly. "Maybe it's not about weakness. Maybe it's about fate. You ever think that, Cutter? That the boy showing up wasn't chance?" Cutter slammed his fist so hard the table cracked. "Don't talk to me about fate. That rat's nothing. I'll crush him myself before this spreads any further." But fate had already moved faster than him. Back on the streets, Malik tried to ignore the rider who shadowed him. He cut through alleys, crossed intersections, even ducked into a pawn shop to pretend he was browsing. Still, when he came out, the rider was there, waiting, silent. Malik's pulse raced. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't even strong enough to defend the little he carried. But something inside whispered not to show fear. He walked toward the public library, a place where he sometimes found warmth and silence. As he climbed the stone steps, he glanced back. The motorcycle was gone. Relief flooded him, but it was short-lived. On the library door's reflection, he saw it. Another rider. Different bike. Same stair. Malik pushed into the building fast, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. His breath came hard, but he forced himself calm. He found a corner table, opened his notebook, and sketched lines of engines and frames to steady his hands. But even there, his mind replayed last night. The bike, the roar, the silence that followed his words. Why wouldn't they leave him alone? Hours later, when the library lights dimmed, Malik stepped out into the night. This time, 3 bikes lined the curb. Their riders leaned casually, but every eye tracked him. Malik's heart hammered. He wanted to run, but running meant pray. So he walked, straight-backed, steady. One of the bikers called out, voice gruff but not mocking. "Hey kid," Malik froze. The voice wasn't Cutter's. It wasn't cruel, it was curious. "You fixed a brother's bike last night, didn't you?" Malik swallowed hard. "So what if I did?" The biker's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. "Then you should know you ain't invisible anymore." Malik's brow furrowed. Before he could ask, the man swung a leg over his bike, revved the engine, and peeled off. The others followed. The street fell silent again, but Malik knew it. Now he wasn't just being watched. He was being measured. And tomorrow, the shadow would grow. The morning broke gray and wet, rain streaking the city like ash falling from the sky. Malik sat beneath the awning of a shuttered corner store, gnawing on the last crust of his bread. The damp cold sank into his bones. But it wasn't hunger or chill that gnawed most. It was the feeling. Eyes. Always eyes. He looked across the street. A pair of bikers leaned against their machines, smoking silently. They weren't Cutters. Crew he could tell by the patches, different city names embroidered beneath the winged skull. Yet they weren't there by chance. Every drag of their cigarettes, every flick of their gaze told him so. Malik pulled his backpack tighter. He wanted to ask why me. But questions only made you look weaker. At the same time, Cutter's rage burned hotter than the cigarettes that littered the Angels' clubhouse floor. His men had begun whispering when they thought he wasn't listening. "The boy fixed a beast," they said. Didn't even blink while Cutter spat on him. Each retelling twisted the knife deeper. His authority was bleeding out, and he could feel it. He snarled, pacing. "He's nobody. You hear me? Nobody." But even his own voice no longer convinced him. Back in the city, Malik wandered toward the soup kitchen. The line was long, filled with gaunt faces, children tugging at tired mothers, men who'd given up shaving months ago. Malik kept his head down, shoulders squared. Yet even here, the bikers followed. One pulled up slow, engine rumbling low, drawing stairs. He didn't speak, didn't cut the line, didn't threaten. He just watched out the cook. A heavy woman with tired eyes leaned across the counter when Malik stepped up. "You all right, sweetheart? You look like you've seen ghosts." Malik forced to smile, shaking his head. "Just tired." But when he turned with his tray of watery stew, he saw the biker still there, helmet now in his hands, face weathered and scarred. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. The man gave a single nod. Not hostile, not friendly. Something else. Malik looked away fast. By dusk, the whispers had turned into footsteps behind him. Not one set, not 2, dozens. He crossed a bridge and went. He glanced back. Headlights flickered like fireflies in the rain. Motorcycles, one after another, rolling behind him. His stomach clenched. His legs screamed to run. But where? On the other side of the bridge, the roar grew louder. More riders. Waited, engines idling in rows. They didn't charge him. They didn't jeer. They simply gathered, filling the street until the night itself seemed made of chrome and thunder. Malik froze in the middle of the road. The smell of gasoline thick in the air, raindrops glistening on black leather vests. He counted 10, 20, 50. Too many. The leader among them, not Cutter, but another man with cold gray eyes, stepped forward. He looked Malik up and down, then spoke with a gravel voice that carried over the engines. "You fixed a bike last night." Malik's throat went dry. "Yeah." The man's lips curled into something between a smile and a challenge. "Good. Then you'll understand why you can't walk alone anymore." The engines roared in unison, shaking the bridge, rattling the streetlights above. Malik's heart pounded. He didn't know if this was protection or a trap tightening around his neck. The rain had stopped, but the streets still shimmered like mirrors. Malik stood at the edge of a cracked parking lot, his sneakers soaked, his backpack heavy with the weight of everything he owned and nothing that mattered. The roar came first. At first, he thought it was thunder rolling across the city. Then it grew louder, closer, until the air itself trembled. One by one, motorcycles streamed into the lot, headlights cutting through the night, engines howling like wolves. Malik's chest tightened. He counted as best he could, but the numbers blurred rows upon rows of chrome and leather. 10 became 20. 20 became 50. Then more. By the time the last engine cut in, there were 120 riders, their formation tight, their silence heavy. They surrounded him, a circle of steel and presence so thick it seemed the whole city had stopped to watch. Malik's breath came shallow. He wanted to run, but there was no escape. He was ringed in by men who could crush him with a single gesture. Rider at the front dismounted, pulling off his helmet. His beard was thick, his face carved by years of scars and weather. His vest bore the same insignia as Cutter's, but his presence was different. Commanding, but not mocking. "You're the kid," he said simply, his voice carrying above the idling engines. Malik swallowed. "I didn't do anything." "You did." The man's eyes glinted beneath the streetlight. "You touched a machine when no one else could. You gave it life when even its owner spat in your face." Malik's gaze flicked around the circle. The riders weren't jeering. They weren't laughing. They were watching him like he was something they couldn't quite name. "I just fixed a bike," Malik muttered. The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Sometimes that's all it takes." From the other side of the city, Cutter was pacing like a caged animal. He had heard the news minutes ago, brought by a trembling prospect. "They're gathering around him," the prospect stammered. "Every chapter in reach. 100, maybe more." Cutter's face went pale beneath his fury. "No, not around him." "Around me. They answered to me." But even as he said it, his voice cracked. Deep down, he knew the truth. The Brotherhood was shifting. His grip was slipping. And all because of a homeless boy he had tried to humiliate. Back in the parking lot, Malik stood frozen as the leader stepped closer. The rumble of 120 engines throbbed through the ground, up his legs, into his chest. The man extended a hand, not in mockery, not in threat. In recognition. "You don't walk these streets alone anymore, Malik." Hearing his own name on the strangers' lips jolted him. How did they know? "Who are you people?" Malik whispered. The man's voice was steady, reverent almost. "We are the angels, and you. You may not realize it yet, but last night you earned something no one else could give. You, respect." The circle of riders erupted, engines revving as if the ground itself was answering. The sound was deafening, rattling windows, making streetlights flicker. Malik's heart pounded so hard it hurt. He wanted to scream, to ask why, to run, but he stood rooted as the storm of machines howled around him. Somewhere far away, Cutter gripped his handlebars so tight his knuckles went white. His empire was crumbling, and at the center of its collapse was a boy with nothing but steady hands and quiet dignity. And now, the whole city knew, the sound of 120 engines still echoed in Malik's chest long after they had roared off into the fey. Night. He sat alone under a flickering street lamp, his notebook in his lap, sketches of bikes half finished. His hands trembled. Respect. The word replayed in his head. It had been spoken like a gift, like something sacred. Yet Malik didn't feel stronger. He felt smaller, like a moth caught in a storm of fire. He whispered to himself, "I don't even Know what I did? Across the city, Cutter was losing control. He slammed open the clubhouse doors, his men snapping to attention. His face was pale but burning with fury, his veins standing out against his neck. They made a circle around him. Cutter spat, pacing like a predator. Around a nobody. And you sat here drinking while my name was being dragged through the dirt. One of his lieutenants shifted uneasily. Boss, they didn't mean disrespect. Cutter's fist crashed into the table, splintering the wood. Disrespect? The boy is stealing my power. Do you understand? They're whispering his name, a homeless brat. If I don't put him in the ground, every brother who ever feared me will start looking elsewhere. Silence weighed heavy. No one dared breathe. Finally, Cutter pointed toward the door, his voice sharp as broken glass. We ride tonight. We find him. And we remind every man who the angels really follow. The roar of engines soon filled their compound, but it wasn't unity that shook the walls, it was desperation. Cutter's men followed not out of respect, but out of fear. Meanwhile, Malik walked the streets with his backpack slung low, head down. He could still feel the echo of the circle that had surrounded him, the leader's words replaying in his mind. You don't walk these streets alone anymore, yet he felt alone. Terribly alone. He ducked into the alley behind the shelter, sliding down against the wall. He pulled out his notebook again. His sketches told a story no one else could hear, designs of frames, engines, tires drawn with the precision of someone who dreamed in machines. For a moment, it was just him and the quiet scratch of his pencil. Then he felt it, the ground trembling, not thunder, not a storm. Engines. The growl came closer, louder, until headlights split the darkness of the alley. Malik's heart hammered as Cutter himself rolled in, flanked by half a dozen of his most loyal men. Their faces were carved in stone, there. Eyes cold. Cutter dismounted slowly, boots crunching against broken glass. He walked with the swagger of a man trying to reclaim ground he already knew he'd lost. Well, well, he sneered. The little mechanic. Thought you could play savior and steal my name? Malik stood, clutching his backpack strap. I didn't steal anything. I fixed a bike, that's all. Cutter's laugh was sharp, ugly. That's all? You made me a fool in front of my men. You think they follow you because you've got magic hands? No. They follow you because they smell weakness on me. And weakness needs blood to be washed clean. One of his men shifted, uneasy, but Cutter didn't notice. His rage blinded him. Malik's voice was steady, though his body shook. I never asked for this. That's the thing about respect, boy, Cutter hissed, stepping closer. It doesn't ask permission. And if I don't crush you now, it'll crush me. The alley filled with silence broken only by the engines idling behind them. Malik's mind raced. He was cornered, outnumbered, alone. But just as Cutter raised his hand, ready to strike, a sound rolled in from the distance. Engines. Not 6, not 10, dozens. The roar grew until it swallowed the night, and Malik realized he wasn't alone after all. The alley trembled with noise. Cutter's hand froze in midair as the sound thundered closer. Dozens of engines, synchronized like a single heartbeat. Malik's eyes widened. From both ends of the street, headlights poured in like floodlights, beams slicing through the dark. The ground shook as motorcycle after motorcycle rolled into view. 10, 20, 50. And then the rest. The alley's narrow walls glowed white from the glare of 100 headlights. The stench of gasoline and smoke filled the air. Cutter's men shifted uneasily, their loyalty wavering under the weight of the thunder. Malik stood in the center, his thin frame dwarfed by the storm gathering around him. His heart pounded, but he refused to shrink. The first rider stepped forward, the same gray-eyed leader who had spoken to him before. His voice cut through the roar like steel. Cutter, step back. Cutter's laugh was jagged, desperate. Step back? From what, him? He's a stray, a nobody. And you fools are treating him like some kind of chosen one. Engines revved in. Answer, a unified growl that shook the ground. Cutter's men glanced at one another nervously. The leader's gaze sharpened. Respect isn't chosen, Cutter. It's earned. Last night, you spat on this boy. He fixed what you couldn't. He gave life where you only gave insults. That's why we're here. Cutter's jaw clenched, rage spilling from every line of his face. "You're siding with a homeless brat over me?" The gray-eyed man took a slow step forward. "We're siding with the truth." The silence that followed was heavier than any blow. Malik could feel every eye on him, waiting, measuring. He swallowed hard. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a leader. But he couldn't stay silent, not now. "I don't want to take anyone's place," Malik said, his voice steady though his chest shook. "I don't want power. I don't want your brotherhood. I just fixed a bike." The words were simple, but they cut deeper than knives. Somewhere in the crowd, a rider shouted, "And you showed more strength doing that than Cutter ever has." The roar of engines erupted again, louder, fiercer. Cutter's face twisted, his arrogance cracking. "You think this changes anything? He's just a boy. He hasn't bled, hasn't fought, hasn't." Malik stepped forward, interrupting. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, slicing through Cutter's fury. "Respect isn't about blood. It's about how you treat people when nobody's watching." The crowd froze. Even Cutter faltered, his lips curling but no words coming. For the first time, Malik saw it, the weakness beneath the anger. Cutter was afraid. Afraid of losing what he had built. Afraid of being small in front of the very men who once worshipped him. The gray-eyed leader turned, raising his hand. The engines revved in unison, a deafening wave that made windows shatter in nearby buildings. Cutter's men backed away, the cracks in their loyalty splitting wide. One even dismounted, pulling off his vest, dropping it at Cutter's feet. "You lost us the moment you raised your hand against him," a man said quietly. Cutter's eyes burned, his breath ragged, but he was no longer a king. He was a man stripped bare in front of his own army, and Malik, the boy with nothing, had done it without throwing a single punch. The night ended not with fists, but with the roar of engines drowning out Cutter's voice, leaving only Malik's. Quiet dignity standing tall in the storm. The night after the confrontation, Cutter sat alone in the bar where he once held court. The wooden floor still bore the scratches from boots and chairs, but the room felt hollow now, drained of life. His whiskey glass trembled in his hand. No one came to sit with him. No one laughed at his jokes. The men who had once lined up to follow his orders were scattered across the city, some already whispering new loyalties. The weight of silence pressed on him. Across town, Malik found himself sitting at a long table in the garage where the Hells Angels met in private. The air smelled of oil and leather, the faint smoke of cigars hanging heavy above them. He was out of place, a thin boy in a borrowed hoodie, surrounded by men with patched vests and scars etched deep in their skin. The gray-eyed leader sat at the head of the table. His gaze was calm, assessing. "You didn't ask for this." The man said simply. Malik shook his head. "No, I never wanted any of it, and yet here you are." The leader leaned forward, folding his hands. "Do you know why?" Malik stayed quiet, unsure if speaking would betray him. "Because respect isn't something we hand out like scraps. It's taken. And somehow, without even trying, you took what Cutter never could." The words sank deep into Malik's chest, both heavy and terrifying. He had never wanted power, he only wanted to survive, to breathe without being spat on, to matter in a world that treated him like dust. Another biker, his face rough and scarred, leaned in. "Kid, you've got a fire we can use. You walk with US, nobody touches you again. You'll never go hungry, never sleep in the cold." The promise was tempting. Malik's stomach tightened at the thought of warm meals, safe nights. But behind that comfort was something darker, something he couldn't name. "I don't want to be like Cutter," Malik said finally, his voice small but firm. "I don't want to live off fear." The men murmured among themselves, surprised by his defiance. The leader raised his hand, silencing them. "And that's exactly why you're different." The words should have been reassuring, but they felt like chains wrapping tighter around him. Meanwhile, Cutter's desperation deepened. He walked into the very same garage later that night, his voice booming, trying to command the air. "This is my crew," he shouted, his face red with fury. "I built this. You think you can throw me away for a boy with grease under his nails?" The room didn't move. The men didn't look at him. Some stared at their boots, others at Malik. The leader rose slowly. "Cutter, it's over." Cutter's chest heaved, his fists clenched, but no one backed him. He was surrounded not by brothers, but by silence. Malik watched, his heart breaking in a way he hadn't expected. For all his cruelty, Cutter was still human, terrified, fragile, and broken by his own pride. Cutter's voice cracked. "You'll regret this, all of you." But his words carried no weight. One by one, his men stood not to join him, but to turn their backs. Vests dropped onto the table, leather patches sliding against wood with finality. Each sound was a nail in the coffin of Cutter's rain dot by the time the last man left the room. Cutter was alone again, his empire reduced to ash. Malik sat quietly, torn. He didn't want Cutter's crown. He didn't want any of it. Yet somehow, it was being placed on his head anyway. The leader's voice broke the silence. "Whether you like it or not, boy, you've become the spark. And sparks either burn out or they start a fire." Malik lowered his gaze, the weight of those words pressing harder than the cold nights ever had. And somewhere in the shadows, Cutter's eyes gleamed with the kind of fury that promised he wasn't done yet. The streets were quieter now, but Cutter's rage roared louder than the engines that once followed him. For days he had wandered, a ghost of himself, watching his men scatter like leaves in the wind. His phone no longer rang. His name carried no weight. But humiliation burns hotter than fire. He sat in a dark corner of his apartment, a gun resting on the table. The bottle beside him was half empty, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw clenched tight. Every word Malik had spoken, every look of pity he had received, replayed in his head until it felt like knives carving into his pride. "They'll see," he muttered to the shadows. "They'll all see." Back at the garage, Malik worked quietly on an engine, his hands steady even as his mind raced. The men treated him differently now. Some nodded with respect, others with a kind of distant fear, but Malik didn't want either. He only wanted peace, but peace never lasts long when vengeance is brewing. A roar shattered the night. Cutter's bike tore into the lot, headlight blazing, exhaust screaming like a war cry. He skidded to a stop, stumbling off the bike, the gun glinting in his hand. The angels moved fast, circling him, but Cutter's wild eyes kept them at bay. His voice cracked with fury. "You think you can take everything from me?" he screamed. "You think a kid like him can replace me?" He pointed the gun straight at Malik. The room froze. The rumble of nearby engines stopped. The world held its breath. Malik's heart pounded, but his hands didn't shake. Slowly he stood, grease staining his hoodie, his eyes locked on Cutter's. "You?" "Lost them because of you," Malik said quietly. "Not me." Cutter's finger tightened on the trigger, veins bulging in his neck. The men around him tensed, ready to leap. But Malik didn't flinch. "If you shoot me," Malik added, "what will you have left?" "Nothing. Just another coward hiding behind a gun." The words struck harder than any fist. Cutter staggered as though the weight of them crushed his chest. His breath hitched, his eyes darting to the men surrounding him, none of whom would come to his side. Still, pride clawed at him. His hand shook, the barrel wavering. "You ruined me." The leader's voice cut through the air like steel. "No, Cutter, you ruined yourself." The silence stretched. Cutter's hand trembled. Malik stood still, calm in the face of death, and for a moment, it seemed the boy's courage stripped Cutter bare. The gun slipped from his hand, clattering onto the concrete. Cutter dropped to his knees, his body shaking, tears streaking down his weathered face. It wasn't weakness, it was surrender. The last shred of his crown fell to the floor with the weapon. The angel stepped forward, seizing him. He didn't fight. His pride was gone, his reign reduced to ashes. Malik exhaled, the adrenaline fading, but his body still tense. He had faced down the storm and survived. As Cutter was dragged away, the leader turned to Malik. "You stood where most men would have fallen. Remember this night, boy." "It'll follow you forever." Malik said nothing. He just looked at the gun on the floor, its shadow stretching long across the garage. For the first time, he realized that his life wasn't his own anymore. He was no longer just a mechanic. He was something bigger, something dangerous. And in the distance, Cutter's broken cries echoed like the last howl of a king stripped of his crown. The night air still carried the echo of Cutter's broken cries. The garage smelled of oil, smoke, and something heavier fear that had just been exhaled by everyone present. The men who had once treated Malik as nothing more than a scrawny kid now looked at him like someone they couldn't define, someone who had stared death in the face and walked away untouched. Cutter's gun lay on the ground, cold and silent, but its shadow stretched across Malik's shoes. He hadn't touched it, hadn't even moved toward it, but it felt like a curse pointing at him all the same. The leader of the Hells Angels stepped closer. He was a man known for never bowing his head, but now his gaze carried a weight Malik wasn't ready for. "You've got steel in you, boy," the leader said, voice low, meant for Malik alone. "The kind you don't find often." Cutter was fire burning bright, but wild and destructive. You're stone, unshakable, and stone lasts." Malik didn't answer. His throat was dry, his heart still pounding from the standoff. He only wanted to fix bikes, to live quietly. Yet somehow, fate had pulled him into a storm larger than himself. One of the bikers dragged Cutter away, but even broken, he tried to lift his head. His voice rasped, bitter as ash. "This kid, he's nothing without me, nothing." But the men didn't listen. They turned their backs on him, a punishment harsher than fists. For a man who once commanded fear, being ignored was the final death. The garage settled into uneasy silence. Engines idled outside like restless beasts, their growls vibrating against the metal walls. Malik felt all eyes on him, waiting to see if he would rise or crumble. He bent down, not for the gun, but for the wrench he had dropped earlier. Grease stained his hands again, grounding him, reminding him who he really was. He tightened the bolt on the half-fixed engine, the simple click of metal against metal cutting through the tension like a heartbeat. The leader watched, a faint smirk on his weathered face. "Even after all this, you go back to work. That's what makes you dangerous. You don't chase power, it comes to you." Malik finally spoke, his voice steady. "I didn't ask for this. I just fixed his bike. That's all I did." The leader's smirk faded, replaced by something more solemn. "Sometimes, boy, a single act is enough to change everything. You helped one of ours when you didn't have to. That debt spread through all of us. And now, whether you like it or not, you've got brothers watching your back." Outside, the sound of engines multiplied. More bikes rolled in, dozens of headlights piercing the night, chrome gleaming under the pale moon. Malik stepped out of the garage and froze. One by one, riders dismounted. They weren't just from the local chapter. They came from miles away, called by whispers of what had happened. A sea of leather jackets, all marked with the winged skull, stretched across the lot. At least 120 men stood there, silent but united. Malik's stomach twisted. The sight was overwhelming. He was just a homeless teenager yesterday, hungry, unnoticed, invisible. And now, one small choice had brought the weight of an entire brotherhood to his doorstep. The leader raised his hand, and the men quieted. He turned to Malik. "You may not understand this yet, but respect in this world is earned, not given. Tonight, you earned more than most men do in a lifetime. You faced down a man we all feared, and you didn't blink. That makes you one of us, even if you don't wear the patch." The men nodded, a ripple of agreement moving through the crowd. Their faces weren't mocking or doubtful, they were solemn, as if standing in the presence of something larger than themselves. Malik swallowed hard. "I don't want to be one of you," he said honestly. "I don't want power or violence. I just want a life where I don't have to fight to exist." The leader studied him, then gave a slow nod. "And that's why you deserve it. A man who seeks power isn't fit to hold it, but a man who rejects it, he's the one it clings to." The words sank into Malik's chest like a brand he couldn't erase. He wanted to walk away, but the roar of 120 engines, the weight of 240 eyes, made him realize something terrifying. He might never be free of this night. Suddenly, one of the bikers pushed through the crowd, carrying a jacket. Black leather, heavy. The winged skull stitched into its back. He offered it to Malik. The garage fell silent again. Malik stared at it. It wasn't just a jacket, it was a crown. A symbol of brotherhood, respect, and danger all woven into one. If he took it, he would no longer be just a mechanic. He would be bound to them forever. He hesitated, his hands trembling. The leader broke the silence. No one's forcing you. You've already proven yourself. Whether you wear it or not, you've earned your place. The choice is yours. Malik's mind raced. Images flooded in nights of hunger, the laughter of strangers who saw him as less, the slap of rejection that still echoed in his bones. Then Cutter's face, broken and lost. A warning of what chasing power could cost. Finally, he lowered his hand. I don't need the jacket, Malik said softly. If respect comes only from wearing this, then it isn't real. I'd rather stand on my own. A murmur swept through the crowd. But instead of anger, there was respect. The leader's smile returned, faint but proud. Then stand on your own, he said. But know this, if anyone comes for you, they'll find us first. The men roared in approval, engines revving in unison, the sound shaking the ground like thunder. Malik stood there, the night sky wide above him, the faces of 120 men lit by moonlight and headlights. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen, respected, not because of a jacket, not because of power, but because he had chosen dignity over fear. As the engines faded into the night, Malik walked back into the garage, wiping his hands on his hoodie. He picked up the wrench again, tightening bolts as if nothing had changed. But deep inside, he knew everything had. The boy who had once been a hungry, forgotten shadow was gone. In his place stood a man who had faced down an empire of leather and steel and walked away unbroken. And though he didn't wear their colors, the truth was clear. The Hells Angels would never forget his name.